The Art Beat, a weekly program putting you in touch with artists and arts events from the J.T. and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University. Hello and welcome to this week's Art Beat on KLZK-FM 105.7. I'm your host, Peter Martins. Glad to be with you on this lovely weekend. And I have a special guest today who is not here to talk about an event or even a program, but actually about himself, which is kind of a refreshing thing. We don't do that very often on the show, but we do it when we have a faculty member who has been at Texas Tech as long as our friend, Professor Richard Meek. Hello, Richard.
I'm glad to be here. See you, Peter.
Great. So I know you're doing a couple, interviews, and there's been stories happening because you are right at a fairly rare anniversary for a faculty member at any institution, much less Texas Tech. And that is the 6-decade mark, right? 60 years.
Starting my 60th decade. Sixth decade, right.
Right. So that would mean you came to Tech first in
1965.
1965. Okay.
It was Texas Technological College. It was College Avenue, not university.
Oh, okay.
And
makes sense, I guess.
We were in one music building, a garage apartment for percussion, animal sciences for, I think it was the organ.
Okay.
And about 5 or 6 barracks buildings.
Barracks left over from...
Well, those wooden buildings that the Army used.
Okay.
That was my first office.
In an old Army barracks building. Wow.
Old Army barracks building. It was to the west of our current library.
Okay.
And if I looked out my window, I could see the horse corral, which is now the parking lot for the MassCom building.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So, gosh, the organist got to play for the cows or something over in the Animal Sciences building?
It was before Himley. That's right.
Okay. Wow. Well, you have seen all manner of changes, not just in the music and fine arts and such at the university, but the university itself and the town itself, I suppose.
In fact, I was teaching theory in the barracks building just north of the music building as they were digging the hole for Himley Recital Hall.
Interesting.
Right behind.
Okay. So I should point out to our audience that your primary, faculty position is professor of bassoon.
I was hired on bassoon, saxophone, and theory.
Oh, okay. All right. So those three were all together. I did not know about the saxophone.
I was the last woodwind player to be added.
Okay.
Well, actually, we added another saxophone professor after I taught for a few years.
Gotcha. Okay. So you were able to split that duty off of your...
But they added me for the bassoon.
Okay.
So we had a faculty wood quintet. Before that, Richard Brown, a graduate student, taught.
Oh, okay.
Played with them.
Okay. And I know you were brought here also because this is my area of music theory that you started to at first and have continued all these many years to teach various courses in music theory.
That was one of my majors.
Okay.
In fact, when I graduated from the Oberlin Conservatory of Music, I declared a bassoon performance major and a theory major.
Okay.
They just laughed. They said, We don't have a theory major. Theory's for musicology, composition, performance.
Sure.
You don't go out in theory.
Right. At that time, right, it was not kind of a separate discipline yet in the mid-century. So yeah, that's interesting. But kudos for trying, and I guess I should say thank you for being at least part of the impetus to create that discipline at all.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed it. Yeah, it's very important.
Well, it is, and obviously it's a foundation for a lot of the students that we...
I teach a whole lot of theory, and I do in theory class. This is called an impositore. What is that in Italian? It means to lean on. You see how that affects your performance?
Sure.
You listen to a lot of the kids play, and they don't realize that the theoretical analysis should shape their performance.
Yes, knowing things helps, doesn't it? Yeah. You're preaching to the choir here for that one. Well, goodness, I know you're going to be honored with the pin and the recognition at the university itself, but I guess I'm more interested in getting your view on and maybe stories about some of the transformations and maybe some of the personalities that have been your colleagues over the years. I think, as you mentioned before, everybody who's been on campus, any music major certainly knows the name Himley because that's the name of the recital hall, named after the inaugural chair, I guess, of the Department of Music at that time.
Gene Himley, yeah.
And he was chair when you came, right?
Yes. Actually, I was invited to apply. They wanted me to apply, and that was because of Robert Deal. Robert Deal taught here in the 50s. Then Oberlin had a junior year in Austria at the Mozarteum. And I took advantage of that, and Bob was the administrator for that program.
Oh, okay.
And he remembers me from touring with the orchestra there. I played with the Kamera Academia. We were Gordon toured. I played for the Austro-American Society recitals, and he remembered me when it came time to add a bassoon, asked me to apply.
Okay. So
In fact, I met Robert. His family's just north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And at the time, I was at the Eastman School in Rochester, New York. And so
far.
Gene Hemley came up to visit with Bob there, and I met and interviewed with the two of them at Robert's old home.
So you did your faculty interview in Pennsylvania. That's
in
wild.
Pennsylvania, right?
All right. So when you came, I know not too long after you came, you were joined by another Eastman graduate in composition, Mary Jean Van Apeldoorn.
Van Apeldoorn, I came, believed, in 1951.
Oh, okay. So she preceded you. Forgive me. Okay.
Yeah, she had established, and that's where we agreed, and a lot of it working together because of the 4 or 5 schools that I worked in theory, including Allen Ford, East Yale, and people like that. When I came, I was just working on the master's degree in theory in Eastman, which was what we call McCoe's theory.
Mm-hmm. So you found a kindred spirit in
Very much, yeah.
Professor Van Apeldoorn.
Yeah, we taught very forming conferences. We used the same material, basically.
Well, I had the pleasure of overlapping with her for a couple of years for her last few years, and she was always a very kind person and has certainly left a stamp on the composition world, and I think, as you say, crafted the programs here.
As all the students would say, she was a hoot.
She was a hoot.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. I think if you were in her class, she was a tough hoot sometimes, but nonetheless,
she made them work.
Yes, that's true. So you knew her as a colleague, and she, I guess, now that I'm understanding, she was here for a good number of years before you showed up. What did she do, if anything, to kind of show you the ropes, or what was in place?
Well, I know she showed me the ropes. I mean, we had pretty much the same background, except she was more in composition and played the piano well, which I don't. Very rudimentary for theory. But we've been through much the same McCoe's curriculum, so we were right on the same street immediately.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So you jumped right into a moving river, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Now, you overlapped. You mentioned Robert Deal, who was professor of trombone for quite a while, and his wife Laura was piano professor for quite a while.
Also from Oberlin.
Fairly recently, right. And then I was mentioning, I was asking about Gene Hemley. So he was chair for the first, decade or so that you were a faculty member, right?
Well, Gene retired, in about 1980?
Something around there, which is when the hall was built, right?
Yeah.
Kind of in his honor.
So I was a good 15, 16 years under Gene.
Okay. And what did the School of Music, how did the School of Music rather change during that period of time? Obviously, you mentioned a saxophonist was added to the faculty, those sorts of things. What are some of the big changes, growth areas you remember?
Well, just to give an idea regarding the faculty, when I showed up that first morning for a faculty meet, I think there were 12 of us, including myself.
Okay.
And the last faculty meet we had between faculty and staff, what were we, 76?
Yes, it was pushing 80, yes.
Almost 80. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
That gives you a great idea of the growth, of course.
Right.
And the School of Music building itself had been added on twice. Mm-hmm. We were originally not attached to the Student Union building at all. You go out the back of the music building, walk across the lawn to get into the Student Union, and most of us, and this is where much of our faculty information took place, is the faculty club lounge.
Okay.
And many faculty would meet, of all disciplines, would meet over there for lunch.
That's when you could fit the entire faculty of Texas Technological College
into
there weren't
one
that many, dining room, right?
There weren't that many that made use of it.
Okay.
It's not that big a room. But it did provide a lot of intercommunication between the schools.
Yeah, boy, that our large operation right now, we recognize how challenging it is that we're all kind of in our own silos. And so you were mentioning the additions onto the School of Music. The original building is from the 50s, I believe, or no, the 60s.
I think it's the latter part of the 50s.
Okay. Yeah. And there was a big addition in
72, about 72.
Okay.
I know that because that's when my son was born, and that's when I was teaching that barrack building, watching him dig the hole.
I see. Okay.
And then we added on just in time, just as I was host for the young organization at the time, the International Double Reed Conference. I hosted that here in '81, and that was one of the first performances in Hemley.
Right, and that
major
was
one.
That
was not the first performance in Hemley. That was. Well, I guess maybe one of the first big major ones. There, at that time, we started the Fernand Gillet double reed competition, which is the largest competition for solo double reeds in the world right now.
Huh.
And the first one was right here in Henley Hall.
And it got its start here. That's really something. Huh. So I think that coincided, what you're saying, 80 or 81, coincided with one big addition onto the School of Music, not yet connecting it with the student union, but...
Well, when they built Henley, they built also the Allen Theater.
Right.
So that whole area of the lawn between the school and the sub was filled in at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then in 81, they added on the west section of the building for faculty offices, things like that.
Right. Practice rooms, faculty offices, right.
Right.
Which is why anyone who's listening who has been in the School of Music and walked around anything beyond the Henley Hall area, it does have a look and feel of an M.C. Escher drawing a little bit, and that I think comes from
everything's on a different level.
Right, the additions over the years.
And
right.
now we're adding. We quickly outgrew that. Now we're adding more.
Yes, there's been effort underway to find some more room so we can maybe fit a few more students in, because yes, we are definitely at capacity at this point in time. And it's interesting, if you've been aware of the School of Music, Henley Recital Hall reopened after some extensive renovation about 18 months ago, and
I'm the only one still around that played the original inaugural opening.
Right, that's amazing, and it tells you how long that hall has served in its kind of original capacity, built in the early 80s. It was over 40 years. And
it's like a Greek theater, as I say. The audience is on an incline down to that. Henley was great. When I came in here, tried to meet with him on one occasion, and he wasn't available. He had to go see about a train station. He had bought one of the railroad stations, and it's still located out on 19th Street, west of the Loop, which I thought was very strange. But it turns out he was very much into antiques and things, and he's a painter. And if you go down to my studio, I have a self-portrait down there.
Oh, self-portrait.
Hanging on the wall on both sides.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thanked them for the dartboard, but it's still there.
And I know we had a couple until somewhat recently in the music conference room. We had a couple of his original paintings up.
We?
Yeah, okay. And they're somewhere. They're in good care, but they're not in that conference room anymore.
Yeah, I used to make some things to hold as chalks and do some woodworking for him.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. And there's a fine portrait of him in the foyer of Henley, too. I've always really admired that picture.
It's by Paul Milosevic.
Okay, great. So he saw us through the first generation, and I'm curious, in the minutes we have remaining.
Of course, he's not the first director of the School of Music.
Oh, he's not? Okay.
No, I'm not sure whether we became an official school at that time or not. Okay. Of course, we had a wonderful band and music program for decades.
Right.
D.O. Wiley was here in the 40s.
Okay.
And brought us up there.
And we were an official department. Music was an official department even back then.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Or a department within the arts and sciences.
Okay.
Right.
Certainly that preceded the Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts days.
And we didn't become a college. When did that happen? That happened
2004, I think. 2003, 2004.
Was it?
Yeah. It was right before I came, as I recall. So I'm curious, going back to that early time frame and thinking of today now, what you're still doing, and kind of a quarter of the way through the 21st century already. Where have you been finding students? Where are you recruiting students from? Where are you connecting with students? How has that shifted over the years?
Well, the biggest shift is the number of colleges and schools that have maintained rather robust music programs.
Okay.
And orchestras, bands always need bassoons.
Mm-hmm.
There are many more bassoons, young men, than there were when I was starting off. In fact, back when I started off back in the 50s, and even when I was a student in 61 in Austria, World War II decimated it so much that they just weren't available, especially in Europe. A lot of our young American bassoonists went overseas for their experience because they had a real need.
Interesting.
That's not the case now. First of all, the growth in the United States has just been tremendous.
Okay.
When I first came, I was asked to, the fall of 65, my first semester, George Robinson was a president of the TMA, I think, or high official, asked me to judge the bassoons for the All-State Orchestra. They were done through tapings.
Okay.
Which was neat, because if you had 5 outstanding bassoon players in one school, they could potentially all go to All-State.
Interesting.
It's not that way anymore.
It wasn't parceled out by regions or whatever.
So I judged the bassoons that go to All-State, and when we got to All-State, then all the bassoons from around the state, the band programs, joined in, and they would audition for the particular ensembles. There was like 2 orchestras and 3 or 4 bands. The judging, just to give you an idea of the numbers, the judgings for the oboes and bassoons, all the oboes and bassoons in Allstate were judged by Noah Nepper, oboist, kind of bassoonist from TCU.
Okay.
Richard, his last name escapes me a moment, the oboist from UT, and I was the bassoon judge.
Okay.
We judged all the oboes, we judged all the bassoons. And there'd be, at the time, we'd have probably Allstate 16 or something. Now there are over 20
Okay.
To do it. Since then, to give you an idea, we have each one of those areas has a judging panel of 5 people.
Okay.
One of our graduates is now employed doing that. That does all the people. And I was demoted to cleaning the woodwind section of the All-State Symphony Orchestra for the last 8 or 10 years.
That doesn't sound like a demotion to me, but
Well, so I've been a participant as a clinician, lecturer, adjudicator at our all-state programs for 60 years.
wow.
This is my 61st one to participate, and for the first time, I didn't have any duties.
Wow. I hope that felt good.
Well, yes, it's marking change in age and.
I suppose. Right. Well, we've been talking today with Professor Richard Meek, who is in his 60th year of teaching at Texas Tech. And we had so much conversation and so many things to share that we're going to bring him back next week and continue this conversation on the Art Beat. We'll see you then. Bye-bye. The Art Beat, a weekly program putting you in touch with artists and arts events from the J.T. and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University.